In 1936, the lower wooden trough, that's how we know when the trough photos were taken that were wood. In 1936, the wood trough went away in the middle of Market Street and a granite basin was placed there. And Myerstown Marble and Granite was the maker for $100. They purchased it. Now here, we Cork and Andy and various people have had to refurbish it. So here you see it being refurbished over the years. Do you remember that? It's just a constant state of refurbishing something, it seems. And there it is now. And in the paperwork I found, the company was really meticulous. They had lots of different quotes to get this granite basin. So that showed us they were very thrifty. They wanted to get, this is one from Anvil, and it has the date 1936. So they were pretty thrifty. They wanted to get the best deal. In 1944, the fountain with the lion, the ornamental fountain at the square, was in the way of traffic. And the Heidelberg Township supervisors agreed that the fountain could be moved to its present location, which is to the west of the old location. And it was done by the Lions Club, and they put in the light poles as well. You can see a little bit, you know which light poles are out there, they're still there. In 1950, so the company never had a lot of money. In 1950, letters were mailed to 300 residents for donations, and that netted $232. So anybody know who that is? You said it earlier. That's Ruth Mock, yes. When did women gain the right to vote?
1920.
Thank you, very good. In 1920, women gained the right to vote. So 42 years later in Schaefferstown, 1961, July 13th, a motion was made by Paul Dubble and seconded by Harry Hewitt that beginning, this was in July of 1961, they said beginning in 1962, all women 16 and over, married or unmarried, could be permitted to attend all meetings of the water company, and they could be eligible to hold office the same as the men. So then, about 11 years later, in 1973, Ruth D. Mock was the first woman elected president of the Schaefferstown Water Company, serving 8 years. And if you look at our documents, she was very active. Her name is all over everything. There's Ruth. That we thank you, Ruth. Pioneer. And here's Glenn Walgamuth, past president, getting water. Now you got Bonnie and Cork. You can tell me if I have this right. There were so many letters and so much documentation about this. I tried to weed it down to a paragraph. There, John Ank, the lawyer, there were a lot of legal letters. So in 1987, this booklet, and I have copies over there. If anyone would want one, you could take one along. This booklet here was published in 1987 to tell the water company history. But it wasn't just to tell the history. It cost $3.75, and you could get it from Glenn Walgamuth. You could get it from Rich Booker, the caretaker. You could get it at Umberger's store. And the reason that it was published was because the Department of Environmental Resources told the company that they were going to start regulating the flow of the water and the cleanliness of the water the same way they would regulate any other public water system, because the company was charging for the water. And the reason the company was charging for the water is because of what? What did we have there? What did we have there to charge for it?
Box.
The money box, yes. So we had a donation box there.
They weren't charging.
Right, we weren't charging. The company was not charging, but the Department of Environmental Resources said that they were, because the donation box was there. So with so much back and forth between the attorneys and Glenn Walgamuth, this is what I gathered. and also Dave Nouse had a Lebanon Daily News article on this. To circumvent having to be regulated, the donation box was moved further away from the fountain. Does that seem right? And then everybody was happy. So since it was moved, yeah. Since it, I mean, that's probably very simplistic, but there was a lot of paperwork, right? Bonnie, there was a lot.
A lot of controversy.
Oh, so this resulted then, they moved the donation box further from the fountain, and then that resulted in a loss of revenue, donations. And then this booklet was published to try to gain some of that money back. And you remember the quarters that we used to collect that had the states on the front and something special about that state on the back? So in a letter dated February 12th that I found, 1998, Peter J. Zug, 102nd Legislative House of Representative member, he wrote to the PA Commemorative Quarter Committee requesting that the Schaefferstown Waterworks be considered as a nominee to be placed on the back of Pennsylvania's quarter. So that was nice. I don't think we made it, but that was nice. The blue historical marker was erected in 1995 by the PA Historical and Museum Commission. And as you guys know, it was a 10-year process from what I could gather. In 1985, the supervisors and Glenn Wolgemuth and the water company, they started the process along with Senator Chip Brightfield's office. The number of new markers was limited to 5 a year. Others would be allowed, but they had to be funded privately. So State Representative Pete Zug obtained a legislative initiative grant for the marker, which cost $2,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys lived it. I'm just reading about it. The Heidelberg Township supervisors at the time, who were also involved pursuing this, were Paul Fetter, Harold McQuaid, and of course our past president, Glenn Wolgemuth. And there's Cork, this is Cork Meyer, and Paul Fetter and Pete Zug. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then this is the unveiling of the historical marker, and that was in 1995. So over the years, emergencies would arise, and residents and people from the town always would step up to help. Other sources of income have been grant monies and bequeaths. We've been very fortunate to have some bequeaths, and Cork Meyer was instrumental in obtaining as many during his tenure as president, caretaker, and treasurer, president, caretaker, and treasurer. He secured lots of grants for the park. So we did many projects. I'm sure you saw many things going on over the last 20 years. And that was due to his work along with people at the township. It was a Clean and Green grant, I believe. Right. Clean and Green from Lebanon County. Right, and he did a lot of work on that. So now I wanted to just say, I read in Jan Taylor wrote this article. So I wanted to talk just a little about how the community, not Jan Taylor, sorry. Not Jan, Diane, sorry. Jan and Diane wrote a book, which I did use. But I read an article by Diane about Taylor's Irby. I wanted to talk about how the community uses the park. So in 1983, Diane interviewed Taylor. Taylor was born in 1999, and we knew him well. 1899. Yes, right. My son was born in 1999. So Taylor was born in 1899. He went to St. Paul's Church. He was the friend of the family. Everybody knew him. And he told Diane how everybody would meet at St. Paul's Church in the summer, and then they would march together to the park for a Sunday school picnic. And the lunch baskets were so big, they were laundry baskets. They were filled with food, and they had to be brought to the park in horse-drawn wagon. And then the entertainment was from the Silver Cornet Band, and the band was paid $10, and they got first choice of the picnic food. The Sunday school members ate after the band, and if you were a guest, you were served last. The picnic was held the last Sunday in July, and the men played baseball after the picnic. So the community could also rent the park. $3 in 1939. It was $3 for the afternoon. If you wanted it for both the afternoon and the evening, it was $8. And starting in 1938, the Heidelberg area churches held Sunday night services in July in the park, and we still do that now. So Sunday nights in July, Sunday church services at 6, 7 o'clock, something like that in the park.
Yeah.
Okay. And one thing, Joey, our son Joey might remember, when about 20 years ago, we had a blessing of the animals in the park, which was really meaningful on a Sunday morning. Our pastor was Steve Erickson from St. Paul's Church, and we all brought our animals and had a church service in the beautiful tranquility of the space, and someone even brought a horse. So that wouldn't have happened in the sanctuary. Okay, now I can't talk about Fountain Park without talking about Baron Stiegel. Can we talk about him for a minute? Are you still okay to sit for another few minutes? Okay, all right. So the Baron title, was self-imposed. He was not a nobleman. Henry William Stiegel, and a lot of people know him as Baron von Stiegel, and von would just mean that you're important. You're giving yourself a nobleman title also, in addition to the Baron. He wasn't wealthy, but I read that he did have a better than ordinary education. He was born in 1729 in Cologne, Germany. He came in 1750 with his mother and his brother, and they lived on North Market Street. Now help me, it said directly across from the Lutheran parsonage.
Yeah.
So would that be here?
Yeah, it's up on the hill where they're fixing up the old house. That was
Okay,
the steel
is that
house.
it?
And the parsonage was across the street, the Victorian house.
Yeah.
Oh,
His house.
the Kepley's house.
Yeah,
Is the
right here,
Kepley's
his
house?
house.
Yeah, your house.
Tom's house.
Hey, there you are.
It's Troy Thomas, he's our vice president. So now we all learned that the Lutheran parsonage was in his house. Did you find anything?
Oh yeah, we've been finding stuff. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't know that, so now I learned something. So in 1752, Henry William Stiegel, he worked in Brickerville at Elizabeth Furnace, and Jacob Huber was the owner. And Jacob named his furnace for his daughter, Elizabeth, right? And Jacob was so impressed by Henry Williams' clerical ability that he let his daughter marry him. So he married Jacob's daughter, Elizabeth, that very same year when he started working there. Elizabeth died in 1758 while she was having their second child, but then he married another woman the same year named Elizabeth. In the same year, 1758, Elizabeth Holtz from Philadelphia. Then Stiegel and two brothers, their last name was Stedman, and another man named John Baer, they bought Elizabeth Furnace from Huber. And then in 1760, Stiegel bought half of the interest in another furnace near Charming Forge. In 1762, along with those two Stedman brothers, Stiegel bought the land now known as Mannheim, and he laid out the town and started making hand-blown glass. So there's the artist's sketch. It was 1769, and Stiegel was traveling back and forth from the two furnaces, and he needed a stopover place. It is said that he built a wood pyramid-type structure, 50 by 50 feet at the bottom, tapering to 10 feet square at the top and 75 feet tall. And one account I read said the cannon was on top. It was built on the highest hill in the town along Market Street in what is now Fountain Park. And if you look at this picture, if you look to the right of the picture, behind those trees is probably where it was. This is where Cork and Linda used to live, right over here. And then this is looking Andy told me what are they doing here, Andy? Making the road?
They're blasting the road, and they have a steam shovel there. They're opening the road down to
Okay,
the
so the
north.
tower would have been up in that area, on the top of the hill. Supposedly, the tower had several floors and was large enough to invite the entire village for lavish meals, which Stiegel did, legend says. Now a lot of people, some people believe everything, some people believe part of the thing, some people don't believe at all. So the interior of the tower was said to have spacious and ornate banquet halls. And Stiegel's servants at Elizabeth Furnace would fire a cannon when he left there in his coach, and then that would let the tower servants know that they had to get ready for their master's arrival. After a period of entertaining at the tower, another fire of the cannon would alert Stiegel's charming forge servants to be ready. And I read that Stiegel enjoyed treating the people of the town, but he was a devout Lutheran, so we can be assured that he would keep his gatherings respectable. And you have to imagine what it would have been like to appreciate this in that time period. It was very quiet, there wasn't any noise pollution. You could send out somebody on a horse riding, but that would take hours to notify someone. So Stiegel's use of these cannons was very ingenious. And what I read, they're records from a store that Alexander Schaeffer ran, where it was noted that a workman came in buying supplies for the tower. And I believe that you do have notation like that, okay? So a lot of people believe that that's proof enough that it existed. It's been said around the area that some of the logs are still preserved in the composition of an old barn in the immediate vicinity. So that would have been up where you lived. Did you ever hear that? That there might, yeah. In 1780, the tower was showing signs of decay. We don't have any specifics in writing. Someone must have torn it down, and it was covered by earth over the years. And then we know Stiegel was put after that in debtor's prison in 1774 in Philadelphia. He did petition William Penn, the governor at the time, and Penn let him out on Christmas Eve of that year. Then he had to live at Elizabeth Furnace, and his fortune had dwindled. And I tried to find out why, and what I could find said overexpansion and lavish living. Also, these Stedman brothers, it said they were outspoken loyalists to the king. And so that could have helped undermine Stiegel's success and made him unpopular in the area because he was associated with the two Stedmans. In 1776, Robert Coleman took the lease to Elizabeth Furnace, and then Stiegel worked for Robert Coleman. In 1779, he lived in the parsonage of the Brickerville Lutheran Church, and he taught at their church school. And in 1780, the family returned to Schaefferstown, and it said they lived in the tower. Records show that he took communion at St. Luke's in 1781, and he taught school in town, likely a Lutheran church school. He moved back into the house on North Market Street. His wife died while visiting a friend in Philadelphia, and he was so poor that he couldn't bring her remains back. So they lay in an unmarked grave in Philadelphia. His death is presumed to have occurred at Charming Forge in 1785, but there's other evidence, notations from 1792 to 1795 that he made charcoal at Elizabeth Furnace during that time. So he may not have died when everybody thought that he died. And since we were talking about the Lutheran Church, I threw these two pictures into. They're digging, are they digging for the trolley track there?
Yeah.
So there's no evidence of Stiegel being buried here on our cemetery or any of his family members being buried there.
His brother is.
His brother is, okay. All right. Thank you. I'd like to know where. I'd like to look that up.
It's close to the Schaeffer.
Schaeffer, okay. All right, so Stiegel's brother is buried there, close to Schaeffer. And Stiegel was a generous, according to records, and God-fearing man. He gave a 100-pound loan to the newly built Lutheran church in 1773, and then he donated it. He didn't make them pay it back. He also gave 12 lottery tickets with any winnings to go to the church's general fund. So now if anybody has information on this, you can help me, because I was piecing together things that I found in all our paperwork. The famed, I'm going to talk about Bert Weber Jr. So Bert Weber Sr. was the owner of the garage in town, is that right? Okay, so this is his son, Bert Weber Jr. So Bert Weber Jr. recovered more than $50 million in sunken treasure. He was, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, he was born in 1942, and he discovered the Spanish treasure galleon, the Nuestra Senora de la Concepcion, in 1978. It sank in 1641, 85 miles north of the Dominican Republic. So he was very interested in history and hunting. And I found a letter. In the early 1970s, Weber attended historic Schaefferstown, their board of directors meeting, to gain support to see if they would go in with him on a tower. This is Bert Weber now. I'm hoping that's him. That's what the internet yielded. So that's him. Okay. So he asked Historic Schaefferstown, would they go in with him and support him if he went to the Schaefferstown Water Company and asked the water company if he could do an exploration and an excavation of the area where the tower was. He was informed by Dr. Charles Spotts, who was president of Historic Schaefferstown in the 70s, that they recently required a ledger that belonged to Alexander Schaeffer, in which there was a wealth of information about the construction of the tower. And I'm thinking that was what I said earlier about supplies for the building of the tower were bought at Schaeffer's store. Then Bert Weber wrote a letter in 1973 to the Schaefferstown Water Company, and he detailed a proposal for consideration of the company. And I'm going to read some of this. He wished, so just so you people who understand this would know what's involved. He wished to grid out with wooden stakes, cord string lines, and survey transits using a sensitive zero drift ferrous, non-ferrous metal detection system. And I have his letter over there if you'd like to look at it, whereby each grid sector would carefully be scanned to pinpoint the location of metallic objects associated with the tower. And he was hoping to unearth nails or spikes or clasps, hinges, and then he was trying to find the nucleus of the tower and the outer perimeter of where the tower might have stood. He proposed that all the artifacts would be donated to the Brendel Memorial Library and Museum. It was also proposed by Weber that the tower could be reconstructed on its original site to preserve and enrich our history. So that part didn't happen. Weber states in his proposal, this is a quote, I would, in conjunction with Historic Schaefferstown, Inc., assume all expenses of said project, providing all equipment and labor. And then I didn't find anything else, whether or not that ever happened, but then I was really happy I found a 1976 Daily News article. And it stated that the company did give Weber permission to research the area. Do you remember that? Kinda, okay. The company did give Weber permission to research the area. He hired the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, one of the leading institutions of archaeology in the world, and a cesium magnetometer test and a soil resistivity test survey were conducted. And something was found. It was called a deviation. A deviation was found not on water company property, but on an adjacent field. A long resistive low, which could indicate a wall or cultivation line. A farmer who owned the land adjacent to the park in 1958 found a wrought iron boot cleaner attached to a 10-foot log beam. Have you heard of that? Horace Keller? Okay. okay? The boot cleaner had the initials HLT and the date 1740 etched on it. So I don't know who, maybe you guys could figure out who that would be, HLT. The farmer reported occasionally having his plow catch on underground obstructions, such as a 10-inch by 10-inch by 4-inch sandstone block. Another time, a sandstone block with a mortar attached was unearthed. And the farmer was said to have turned the sandstone with the mortar over to the Brendel Museum, according to the article. So maybe you guys can have fun looking for that. Weber claims that more evidence wasn't found because of bulldozing of the area, and that would have destroyed any artifacts right below the surface. And in the Daily News article, Weber was said that he was going to pursue permission of the landowner to continue to explore. So I don't know if that ever happened. So I'm almost finished, and then I just want my husband to come up and just tell you about some of the pictures I'll show, and then this will be really quick. Andy, come up.
Yeah,
So how the park operates today, the way we operate today is we have, whenever a need arises, some of the members are called or emailed, and we get together and we take care of what needs to be done. We have a yearly business meeting, and anybody that resides on Market Street is invited to that meeting. So the township usually cooperates with us and gives us the addresses, and then we send out cards to them. This past summer, we met in the pavilion at the park, and then we elect new officers. We elect a president, that's Andy. Our vice president is Troy Thomas, and he lives in the former Lutheran parsonage. And the secretary is Stacy Diefenbach. She lives at the end of Market Street, and I'm the treasurer. So Cork was our treasurer, and he turned it over to me. I'm not a numbers person, but I did it as a favor for Cork, and I'm still doing it. You can't say no to Cork. So now I just want to go through this. This won't take long. I just want you to know we're almost done. So this sign right here, in the park, it's a constant struggle of things getting knocked down by trees, and it's very wet and damp. Things get eroded easily. So our sign got knocked down by trees. That sign right there. We had a nice bulletin board. And here's Bonnie Wagamuth, and I believe that's your president. Is that your president? Yes. Yeah. And it's his birthday today. That's your president. And Bonnie generously, Bonnie Wagamuth wanted to do something in memory of her husband Glenn, who had been our past president and our caretaker and just such a friend of the park. She donated a new bulletin board sign in Glenn's memory, and then a group of us was invited to dedicate that. And here's Lynn reading something at the dedication. It was a beautiful day. And Pete Zug, a friend of Glenn's, was at the ceremony. Here's our new sign donated by Bonnie and was our speaker. And then there's Cork and the First Lady, Linda. Cork's been our president, our treasurer, and our caretaker. And he got a lot of, at one time, all at one time, yeah, probably. He got a lot of grant money for the park, so we're very thankful for that, and we're thankful to Bonnie for the new sign. Okay, so now, Andy, I'm gonna go through, and Andy, if you have anything to say, so trough maintenance. When you have wooden troughs, it's just a constant thing.
It's just a constant struggle. A leak, algae builds up. You have to clean it out every 2 weeks or so and chlorinate it to keep the green algae off. And they had a tractor to lift in the new trough.
So I believe this is Glenn, and I believe this is Clifford Mock. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're
And Clifford's lifting it himself.
they're constantly making. There's Cork. Here's Cork right there.
Supervising.
Mhm.
No, he's actually working on some of the pictures. Jamie Wagamuth, Glenn. I believe this might be Rich Booker. Does that look like Rich?
I don't think he had shorts.
And there's Harvey Barton. If anybody, right? Is that your Uncle Harvey? Okay. There's Cork.
See, I was working.
Glenn, I don't know who that man is, do you know? Anybody know? Clifford Mock and Glenn. And here, this is Marie Hippert. Any of you older Schaefferstown people remember her?
That was my auntie, but she's not.
She was your aunt. Oh, I loved her. So, and this was from 1936, $52 for white Idaho pine. Just a constant job. So here's a chicken barbecue,
Chicken barbecue.
fundraisers, David Ginder, Scott Moyer, Harvey Smith. Cork, this is Cork. Scott Moyer, Harvey Smith, and that's Rich Booker. He was the caretaker when Andy and I were little. There's Cork and Harvey. Bonnie's in the middle right here at their chicken barbecue, and Marie. Judy Kepley. Daryl Martin and Jared Wogamuth. Oh, sorry. And another thing is just constant work on the buildings and work days. Do you wanna talk about that?
Yeah, well, they're just concreting the floor there.
That's
John Kramer, and
that is John. Frank Moyer.
Frankie Moore, Glenn, Scott.
So the president, probably Glenn, would call a work day and people would show up and give their Saturday and work for free.
Those guys were the construction guys.
There's Glenn, what's he doing?
Pouring concrete, leveling it up.
Level it all, yeah, with the shovel.
Mhm.
Frankie Moyer and John Kramer, right?
Yep.
That's the inside of the refreshment stand,
But that's
that's
gone
not there.
That was
Yeah.
just removed.
Taking a break. So another just constant refurbishing of the buildings due to how many trees there are and how old the trees are. So Andy, you wanna talk about this?
That's just when they were building the pavilion.
Because,
A tree.
The tree took the
tree
old one
fell.
down, and they put a new one up.
Yeah, took the whole thing down, we got insurance money to rebuild it.
There's one of the culprits.
I mean, you can just see, and these pictures are largely due to Cork. He took a lot of pictures and handed them over to me. So I had hundreds of pictures to go through with things like this.
There's one of the buildings.
After every storm, we just go over and,
It's just putting in a new pipe at one point.
right, so if you have underground pipes, along with the buildings being damaged by trees, you're gonna have a lot of the pipes damaged underneath. There's Doug Ginder doing something.
I think that's Pete Leavold digging something out down at the bridge.
Pipes, and this is where Andy and I live. This is the former Wogamoose house. Just more
Digging another
pipes.
pipe. Pulling a building down.
That was just kind of a decrepit building that we decided we wouldn't repair, right? It was,
Right.
became dangerous.
And Hoover
Yeah,
tore it down.
it didn't stand much of a chance.
And that's the refreshment stand that was hit by the tree.
Fortunately, we have a lot of neighbors that have some big equipment that just come in and donate their time.
Matt Hall.
Yeah.
Just the bandstand is made of wood, so it always has to be redone.
Mhm.
Well, the original, poles there that were round trees that held it up and they deteriorated at the bottom,
They're
rotted out, so then we got them made up over reply.
And they're starting to rot out now
And
at the
are they?
bottom.
Yeah,
That's how long that's been.
yeah.
It's just a beautiful building though, and we definitely want to preserve that. The Boy Scouts and people for their Eagle Scout project, one time, they got all the benches together and put new wood on
I think
them.
they built the benches, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in 2013, it was the 250th anniversary. So Cork said, let's get a committee together and have a celebration. So we did, and he got Larry Stoller, a person from Schaefferstown who was county commissioner at the time. Larry spoke, and you got the Raresburg band, and we had refreshments. It was a really nice afternoon.
That was.
Got business sponsors. What?
12 years ago. And there's our
And
program
then-
for activity.
And then I ended with this one, because this is the thing we probably get the most comments on. Then we put up a nativity scene in the park, and I wanted to close with how we got this. So this came from St. Paul's Church up here. Our church, St. Paul's, got a new nativity, and they said, does anybody want to buy the old one? And they had no takers, so they said, finally, after months, put it in the dumpster. So it was in the dumpster. And then one day I drove by and I said to Cork, do you think that would be okay if we would get it and we would put it up? And then he said, why, sure. So then, of course, then Andy was told to go get it in his truck, and he got it and brought the pieces out of the dumpster. And at first we set it up at the bottom of the park at the trough, but then Andy had the idea, he's putting it in the band shell. And what's really neat about that, now that we don't have the refreshment stand in the way anymore, you can come from the hill right up here as you first enter Schaefferstown at Troy's house, and you can look and you can see all the way up into the band shell, and you just see it lit up with a star, and it's just a really neat sight. So every year the nativity comes out, and then it goes back in, and the Moravian star. So that's our presentation, and we're humbled that you would come and listen to us, and if we got anything